Everyone is dealt a different hand in life. Maybe you were born in the States, maybe you were born in Canada, China, maybe you had two parents, maybe you had just one parent raising you, maybe you had siblings, maybe you didn't. Just like in the game of poker, everyone's dealt a different hand, but no matter what hand you're dealt, you can still win the game. And the same is true of life. We see examples of people who are born into wealthy, highly educated families, and they end up doing really poorly in life. And then we see people who are practically homeless who end up doing incredibly well in life. One of my favorite quotes is from a spiritual teacher named Yogananda. And he said that your challenges were not sent to break you, but they were sent to make you. And so I think this is a powerful reminder and a powerful analogy to remember that it's not what life throws at you. It's what you do with what life gives to you. Another example that I really like, hopefully you can't hear my cat eating food in the background. Another example that I really like is the example of the two brothers. And let's say in this hypothetical example that these two brothers grew up with an alcoholic father. And you interview them as adults and you ask one of the brothers, why are you an alcoholic? And he said, my dad was an alcoholic. That's why I'm an alcoholic. And you ask the other brother who's never had a drop of alcohol in his life, and you say, why do you not drink? And he says, my dad was an alcoholic. That's why I never drink. And I think that points to the fact that we have a lot more power over our lives than we typically give ourselves credit for. Maybe even the word power over our lives isn't the right phrasing of it, but we have the power to choose who we become. I think that's a better way of saying it. We have the power to choose who we become much more than we give ourselves credit for. And I think it's important to recognize that. And similarly to the analogy of poker is, you're dealt your starting hand. So like your parents, your home life, culturally, where you live in the world, that's kind of your starting deck, your starting hand that you're given. But then also in the game of poker, you get new hands. And that's the same with life, which is no matter where you start or come from, you're given opportunities. You interact with new people. You form new relationships. And every single time that happens, it's like getting a fresh hand. And how you play that hand, how you respond to what life gives you, is what you get out of life. You look at some of the most amazing people that we see in the world today. I'll give you an example. Tony Robbins, he's the big business guru and life coach guy. But growing up, he had an abusive mother. He had many different stepfathers. His mother used to beat him and all kinds of stuff. He was incredibly poor. And now he's this bubbly, loving guy. He's this hyper-successful businessman. But he also gives back. He feeds millions of families every year through his foundations, has written multiple best-selling books, and so on and so forth. And so even though from an outside perspective, he was dealt the worst hand possible. Abusive mother, no money, that kind of thing. He still made his life into a beautiful love story and chose to live it that way. He chose to let his challenges make him instead of break him. And so maybe that's an invitation to reflect on what challenges you might be going through in your own life. Or maybe challenges that you've gone through in the past. What type of parent you had. Maybe you had a parent who was bipolar, or you had a sibling who was really mean to you. Whatever it might be. Maybe that challenge was sent to teach you something, to make you into a being of more kindness, more compassion, more wisdom, more strength, rather than to break you. I heard another beautiful spiritual teaching that said every story needs a little bit of sauce. Another way of saying that is every soup needs a little bit of salt in it. You need a little pinch of twist. You need a little pinch of challenge, something to kind of spice up your life. And now that doesn't mean that you should go seek melodrama and seek crises and challenges and stuff like that. But what it's kind of pointing to is that nobody has ever lived a life without challenge. Even the most hyper successful people that you can possibly imagine, they still deal with challenges. And that's okay. That's the nature of life. That's how we learn and grow through things. I've never watched a really entertaining, really good movie without some kind of even just minor conflict. Now, that's not saying that in order to live a good life, you have to suffer. I definitely do not believe that. I think life is meant to be filled with happiness and joy and love. But maybe just think about that the next time that you're going through a challenge. That like, okay, this is just a little bit of sauce that's getting added into my story. This is going to help me when I'm telling this story to my kids. Tell them about the time that I went through this challenge or that challenge. And to kind of wrap up this video talking about challenge and potential and the different hands that you're dealt, I'll talk to you a little bit about an example from my own life of playing hockey. So when I was a freshman in high school, I was getting ready for tryouts. I was talking to the coach. I was told that I'd probably make the varsity team and be like a impact freshman right off the bat. And a week before tryouts, I broke my arm pretty bad. My right arm, I took a hit, collision, broke pretty bad. I was also like an hour away from the hospital, so I had to sit with it broken for like 3 hours, which was not fun. And I missed basically that whole season. And for the first few months, I was super depressed. Like all this time I'd been working, training for tryouts, I was super depressed. But then it lit a fire under me. So that off season, when I healed and when I got better, I trained like I had never trained before. I researched all kinds of different athletes and training programs and personal trainers and all kinds of stuff like that. And I probably got into better shape than I would have been in had I not had that injury, had I not had that challenge. And so maybe that was a little bit of sauce for my story. It's something that taught me something. There's another last thing I'll say before I end off this video is there's another great little tale about the Chinese farmer. And there was this, so I'll tell it to you now. There was this guy, he was a farmer, and one day a horse wandered onto his farm. And all the townspeople said, what good luck, what good luck. But then his son got on the horse to ride the horse, and he fell off and he broke his leg. And everyone said, what bad luck. And he was like, we'll see. And then the military came to take his son to the army, to the draft. And they couldn't take him because he had a broken leg. And people were like, what good luck. And he was like, we'll see. And so a kind of example from that story is that it's not what life gives to you. It's what you make of what happens. For me, like, would I go back in time now and change that experience from when I broke my arm? Probably not. I think it taught me more things about myself, got me really passionate about fitness and kind of the process and the science that goes into healing and building athletes and things like that. So I don't think I'd go back in time and change that. So this is a reminder that whatever hand life is dealing you right now, whatever challenging relationship situations or financial situations or school situations that you might find yourself in, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens. No matter what hand you're dealt, you can make that hand a winning hand. And maybe it's just adding a little bit of sauce to your story. Thank you.